Zara woke before the first rooster answered the night. The sky was still bruised with darkness, and the compound lay quiet except for the soft grumble of goats shifting in their pen. She sat up slowly on her woven mat, stretching her back with the tiredness of someone who had not slept deeply in years. The house never belonged to her. She lived inside it like a tolerated shadow. She folded her mat and placed it in the small corner Madame Risicot allowed her, a place with no door, no privacy, no trace of softness, only a rusted lantern, a cracked bowl, and a pile of chores that waited for her every dawn without fail. Her hands still smelled faintly of palm oil from the cooking she had done the night before. Her knees ached from scrubbing the compound floors. Her eyelids felt heavy from lack of sleep, but no one cared if she rested. No one checked if she was hungry or tired or whole. She stood, washed her face with the leftover water from the kitchen clay pot, tied her wrapper, and stepped outside into the cold morning. The air tasted clean, almost sharp. A thin mist clung to the ground and curled around her ankles. Somewhere in the distance, someone's cooking fire was struggling to wake. The world, for a moment, looked gentle. Inside the house, a door banged open. Madame Risicot's voice cut through the air. "Zara, you're moving like you don't know today is important. Come here." Zara pulled in a breath and walked toward the veranda. The lantern light from inside cast Madame Risicot's figure in a harsh glow. The woman stood with her arms folded across her chest, wrapper tied tight, her expression already irritated, as if she had started the day searching for something to be angry about. Falake and Temi stood behind her, half-dressed in wrappers made of bright new Ankara, their eyes full of excitement that morning had finally arrived. The prince was coming today. Every daughter in Iroko village had been polishing their skin, steaming their hair, washing their wrappers, and imagining the moment they would stand before Prince Kolade. A future queen lived somewhere in the village, they kept saying, but nobody, not one living soul, believed that girl was Zara. Madame Risicot gave her a long, meaningful stare that carried both warning and insult. "You know what you're doing today," she said. Zara said nothing. She already knew. "People are preparing their daughters for the prince," Madame Risicot went on, her tone rising. "But you will take the pot and fetch water from Omi River, before the sun is up, before anyone sees you loitering around the square like you belong there." Falake and Temi exchanged a tiny smirk with Zara. Zara felt the sting of it, but didn't react. Madame Risicot wasn't finished. "And don't come back until that pot is full. Go now." The command landed with finality. Zara's eyes flicked to the big clay pot leaning against the wall. It was the worst one, heavy even when empty. She bent and lifted it with practiced care, balancing its weight on her hip before raising it onto her head. As she stepped out of the compound, Madame Risicot's voice followed her like a hook. "And wear that old wrapper. I don't want anyone mistaking you for one of my daughters today." The door shut. Zara didn't stop walking. She didn't even blink. Her feet carried her forward out of habit, but she felt the words burn low and steady in her chest. The village was waking now. Lanterns flickered on. Women swept their compounds. Men stretched and yawned. The reddish morning light broke slowly across the sky, casting everything in hues of amber and gold. People she passed didn't greet her. A few looked through her like she was air. Others looked at her the way people look at a stray thing that doesn't know its place. She kept walking. Her steps found the path leading to Omi River, a long stretch of dusty earth bordered by fields of cassava and tall iroko trees. Birds stirred in the branches. The cool morning quiet wrapped itself around her. Here, away from the compound, away from Madame Risicot's sharp gaze, she let her shoulders loosen the smallest bit. By the time she reached the riverbank, the sun was climbing, warm but soft, spreading across the still water like a blessing.
Zara lowered the heavy pot from her head, massaging the tender curve of her neck. She inhaled the river air deeply. It smelled of wet earth, cool stones, and memories she couldn't quite touch. The river never asked her to hurry, never raised its voice, never treated her as less. She stepped to the edge and knelt down, dipping her hands into the cool water. A shiver ran through her. Calm, quiet, almost like the river had been waiting for her. She was filling the pot when she heard it. Footsteps. Slow, even, getting closer. She turned once and froze. A man stood a few feet away, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a simple indigo caftan with gold embroidery that caught the sunlight. No crown, no escort visible, but his presence held something steady, something disciplined, something refined. He didn't smile at once. He only looked at her as though he hadn't expected to find anyone here this early, let alone a girl kneeling by the water in a faded wrapper, river mist curling around her like a small secret. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm. Zara swallowed, her heart lifted, then dropped, then steadied itself. She knew who he was. Prince Kolade. And for a long breath, she couldn't move. She couldn't even stand. Zara pushed herself upright, careful not to slip on the damp stones. Her palms were wet, and for a moment she didn't know what to do with them. Wipe them on her wrapper, fold them, hide them. He stepped closer. Not enough to make her uncomfortable, but close enough that she could see the fine stitching on the cuffs of his caftan. The gold thread shimmered in the early light. His sandals were dusty from walking, the kind of dust you only get from village paths, not palace courtyards. He wasn't here for ceremony, he wasn't prepared for an audience, and yet she was the audience he found. "Did I startle you?" he asked. His tone was gentle, not the kind people used when they believed they were superior. He sounded like a man asking a real question, expecting a real answer. Zara steadied her breathing. "A little. Forgive me, I didn't mean to intrude." He glanced at the wide, quiet river stretching out behind her, as if this place was something he'd been searching for, a small escape from the noise waiting for him in the village square. She lowered her gaze. "You're not intruding." For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The morning sun climbed through the branches and spilled over the water, stirring flecks of gold in the current. A thin breeze brushed across the riverbank, carrying the scent of wet leaves and fresh earth. Prince Kolade looked at her again, this time with a kind of thoughtful curiosity. "You came early." "I usually do." He nodded slowly, as if that told him more about her than she realized. "The village is preparing," he said. "I could hear the drums from the road." "I heard them too," she said, though she didn't look toward the square. She didn't want him to misread the reason she wasn't there. He studied her face, not boldly, not with the entitlement of a man used to having people displayed before him. It was quieter than that, patient, observant. "What brought you here instead?" he asked. The question hit a soft, aching place inside her. She felt it like a finger pressing gently against a bruise. She lowered her eyes and dipped her hand in the water again, letting the coolness travel up her arm. "Responsibility," she said. There was no self-pity in her tone, no complaint, only truth. Kolade watched her for another long second. "That's a heavy word for someone your age." "It's lighter than most of the things I carry," she said before she could stop herself. Their eyes met. Something shifted between them, subtle, but real enough that she felt her chest tighten. He didn't look away. If anything, his expression softened. "What's your name?" he asked. "Zara." He said it once, quietly, as if it tested its weight. "Zara." Her heart reacted in a way she couldn't control. It wasn't romance, not yet. It was the shock of hearing her name spoken gently, as if it belonged to someone worth addressing with care. "Do you come here often?" he asked. "I usually do." She nodded. "The river is calm. It doesn't ask for anything." His mouth lifted slightly at that. "I envy it then." You looked at him, surprised. He wasn't joking. There was something in his eyes, tiredness maybe, pressure, a loneliness that had edges. He took a few steps toward the water's edge and crouched, letting his fingers skim the surface. The river rippled around his hand. "You're right," he said. "It is calm." The quiet stretched between them, warm and unhurried. Zara found herself studying him the way he had studied her. He wasn't like the royal stories people told. He looked real. The lines of his face were gentle but firm, shaped by discipline more than luxury. His hair caught the sunlight, the breeze brushing against it. His posture was relaxed, not stiff with arrogance. He looked like a man carrying expectations he didn't always want to carry. Finally, he rose to his feet, brushing off his hands. "I should go," he said reluctantly. "They'll be looking for me soon."
The disappointment she felt startled her. She didn't show it, but it tightened somewhere low in her stomach. He took a slow breath, then looked at her again. "I'm glad I came this way." She dropped her gaze. "I'm sure the village square is more exciting." "If I wanted excitement," he said, "I would have gone straight there." Her breath caught. He wasn't flirting, he wasn't performing, he was just being honest. He took one step backward. "Will you be there later?" "No," she said, her voice quiet but steady. He tilted his head slightly, waiting for an explanation. She gave the smallest shrug. Not everyone is expected to attend. Understanding flickered across his face. Real understanding. And something else, disapproval at the idea that she had been pushed aside. "I see," he murmured. He hesitated, as if deciding whether to say what he wanted to say. Then, softly, "This won't be the last time we speak." Her heart stumbled. But before she could reply, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the pathway lined with tall iroko trees, sunlight trailing behind him. Zara stood still long after he left. The river moved gently at her feet. The morning breeze warmed. The village drums called in the distance. But for the first time in her life, something in her chest refused to stay small. Something had shifted. Zara balanced the full pot on her head and began the long walk back to the compound. Her steps were steady, but her mind wasn't. The prince's voice kept replaying in her thoughts, quiet but sure. "This won't be the last time we speak." It startled her every time she remembered it. She kept trying to push the memory aside, but it rose again like a stubborn ripple on still water. By the time she reached the village edge, the crowd had thickened. Young women in bright Ankara fabrics hurried past in clouds of perfume. Mothers stood under canopies adjusting their daughters' gelees one last time. Drummers tested rhythms in sharp bursts that echoed down the streets. People were excited, eager, vibrant. Zara felt like a small ghost walking through a festival that wasn't meant to include her. A few villagers noticed her coming with the pot on her head. They stepped aside without meeting their eyes, as if her presence might dilute their daughter's chances. Women whispered quickly into their palms. Men glanced at her and then looked away, uninterested. None of it was new, but after the river, it stung in a different way. She let out a quiet breath and kept walking, hugging the shadows. When she entered the compound, Madame Rissacat snapped her head around so fast her earrings swung. "So you finally remembered to return," she said. Zara set the pot down, careful not to let it crack against the ground. Her palms burned from carrying the weight. "I brought the water." "You're late," Madame Rissacat said sharply. "Were you sleeping at the river? Do you think the whole world has the luxury to wait for you?" Zara bit back her reply. In this house, explanations only fed anger. Falake stepped out from behind her mother, adjusting her beaded necklace. "Mama, just leave her," she muttered. "We need to hurry. They said the prince is already in the square." Temi swished past in a blue and silver wrapper that shimmered every time she moved. She looked Zara over from head to toe, her gaze sharp. "You'll sweep the compound while we're gone, and wash the plates, and cook the yam, and—" "Enough," Madame Rissacat snapped. "Let's go."
She didn't look back as she led her daughters out. Their laughter drifted behind them, soft and giddy. The gate closed. The compound fell silent. Zara stood alone by the kitchen shed, her breath catching in her throat in a way she hadn't expected. The pot of water glistened beside her. A few stray leaves danced across the dusty ground. Her chest tightened, not from envy, but from something deeper, a tiredness that felt older than her years. She leaned against the low fence and closed her eyes for a moment. Why did he talk to me? Why did he sound like he meant it? Why did I want to believe him? A soft knock on the gate cut through her thoughts. She opened her eyes and frowned slightly. Nobody knocked here for her. She walked towards the gate and pushed it open a few inches. A small girl stood outside, maybe 9 or 10 years old, holding a small bunch of hibiscus flowers. Her face was bright with excitement. "Are you Zara?" the girl asked. Zara blinked. "Yes." The girl practically bounced. "My older sister said she saw you at the river with the prince." Zara froze. The girl leaned in, whispering loudly. "They said he didn't talk to anyone else like that. Is it true he smiled at you?" Heat crept up Zara's neck. "You're mistaken. I was only fetching water." But the girl grinned, unconvinced. "My sister doesn't lie. She said he looked at you like he recognized you, even though she knows you've never met before." Zara's heart thudded. The girl thrust the hibiscus flowers into Zara's hands. "I picked these for you. I don't know why, but it felt right." Zara stared at the flowers, unsure of what to do. Before she could respond, the girl turned and ran off, leaving a small cloud of dust behind her. Zara closed the gate and leaned her back against it. Her pulse was racing now. So people had seen. So the river encounter wasn't hidden. So word was already floating like stray wind. She looked down at the hibiscus in her hand. The petals glowed a deep velvety red, the kind that seemed to hold its own light. She brought them to her nose and inhaled. The scent was soft, clean, unexpectedly comforting. She didn't know it then, but this moment, the gift from a stranger, was the first crack in the shell Madame Rissacat had built around her life. A sign that the world had shifted, even if she was still standing in the same place. She placed the flowers inside an old calabash and tucked them gently onto the wooden shelf near her mat. Then she rolled up her wrapper, tied her hair, and stepped into the sunlight to begin sweeping the compound. But her heart moved differently now. There was a quiet, trembling awareness inside her, a sense that something had started, something she didn't know how to name yet. By midday, the village square became a living thing. Drummers played in tight, skilled rhythms that rolled across the air like waves. Women fanned themselves under bright canopies. Young girls whispered and giggled behind their hands. Every eligible daughter of Iroko stood tall, dressed in colors that caught sunlight like precious stones.
The prince walked among them with the calm patience of a man who understood both the weight of his position and the expectations pressing down on him, but his eyes, though attentive, were distant, searching. People noticed. "His Highness doesn't seem impressed," one woman whispered. "He's barely looking at any of them," another murmured. Falake stepped forward with a practiced smile, chin lifted, eyes lowered in what she believed was the perfect balance of humility and allure. Temi followed with her own version of poised elegance. They each bowed before him. He offered a polite nod in return. Falake's smile faltered just a fraction. Temi stepped closer. "Your Highness," she said softly, "our compound is one of the finest in this village. My mother always—" Kolode cut her off gently. "Your names?" "Falake and Temi Risikat." He nodded again, but his expression didn't change. Neither sister sparked anything in his eyes. He moved on. The girls exchanged looks that mirrored the same internal question. Did he not notice us? How? Why? But something else was happening in the square. A cluster of women near the front were whispering loudly, unaware of how far their voices carried. My cousin saw him at the river this morning, one said, fanning herself hard. With a girl. A beautiful girl, added another, widening her eyes. Not one of the daughters here. A village girl? Alone? With the prince? Yes, now, they said he spoke with her as if he knew her. Falake's heart dropped. Temmie's face tightened with dread. A faded wrapper. Quiet. Alone. Dark skin. There was only one person in Iroko who fit that description at the river that early. Zara. Temmie shook her head in disbelief. Impossible. She was fetching water. She wouldn't dare talk to him. But the women continued. They said he smiled. He even sat by the river. Falake felt a stomach twist, a sharp, sour knot forming inside her. A girl they had dismissed, a girl they had shoved aside, a girl they had hidden from the world with chores and insults and tattered wrappers. A girl the prince had noticed. Temmie grabbed her sister's wrist. We have to tell Mama. Falake nodded, swallowing hard. Before the whole village knows. But it was already too late. The whispers had spread from group to group, crossing the square like wildfire. Some people doubted it, some believed it entirely, some simply repeated it because stories that don't make sense are the easiest to pass around. Prince Kolade overheard none of this, but his mood had changed. His attendants noticed. When he paused in the shade of a mango tree, his chief guard leaned close. My prince, are you well? Kolade gave no explanation, but he felt restless, distracted, pulled toward a direction that wasn't the village square. The river. Or rather, the girl at the river. Her face kept rising in his mind uninvited. Calm, steady, grounded in something real. She hadn't performed for him. She hadn't tried to impress him. She hadn't even asked for his attention. And that, more than beauty, more than elegance, more than tradition, had unsettled something deep inside him. He couldn't name it yet, but he felt it. Back at the compound, Zara swept the ground in slow circles, the broom bristles whispering against the dry earth. Her arms ached, her waist hurt, and sweat clung to her back. The sun sat high now, hot and unforgiving. Yet her mind wasn't on the chores. It kept drifting. Back to the river. Back to him standing there. Back to the unexpected ease of speaking to someone she should have been terrified of. She shook her head and swept faster, as if motion could clear her thoughts. A sudden slam at the gate made her jump. The wooden frame rattled hard, almost breaking off its hinges. Heavy footsteps stormed into the compound. Madame Risicot. Temmie and Falake trailed behind her, their faces stiff with panic and humiliation. Zara braced herself instinctively, stepping back from the center of the compound as Madame Risicot advanced. You foolish girl, she hissed, her voice sharp enough to cut palm kernel. What did you do? Zara blinked, confused. I swept the... Not this, Madame Risicot snapped. At the river. A cold ripple ran down her spine. The river. Madame Risicot jabbed a finger toward her. You said you were seen talking to the prince by yourself. Zara felt the ground tilt beneath her. Falake glared at her with a mix of fury and disbelief. Temmie folded her arms, her jaw tight. I didn't call him, Zara said quietly. He came on his own. Oh, listen to her, Temmie scoffed, as if princes wander into the forest for her sake. Madame Risicot pointed toward the house. You will not go near the square. You will not leave this compound again today. Zara swallowed hard. I wasn't planning to. Madame Risicot stepped closer until her shadow swallowed Zara's face. If ever you embarrass this family, if ever you dare to let the prince see you. Falake touched her mother's arm lightly. Mama, people were talking everywhere. We had to pretend we didn't even know she existed. Zara's throat tightened. Didn't even know she existed. That line hurt more than the rest. Madame Risicot's eyes narrowed, low and dangerous. If whatever spell you're weaving, stop now. He will never choose someone like you. A slow breath left Zara's lips. I'm not weaving anything, she said softly.
Madame Risicot's eyes narrowed. Good. Stay out of sight. She turned and stomped into the house. The door slammed. Temmie followed, nose in the air. Falake lingered at the doorway for a heartbeat, her expression torn between anger and something else. Fear? Confusion? Unease? But then she looked away and disappeared inside. Zara stood alone in the heat, broom hanging at her side, dust rising around her feet. Her heartbeat was loud in her ears. She wasn't foolish. She knew how the world worked. She knew the prince had responsibilities, expectations, a line of noblewomen waiting to be chosen. She was nobody. But still, something in her chest refused to shrink back into silence. She placed the broom against the wall and sat down on the low wooden stool near her mat. Her hands trembled slightly. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "I didn't ask for this." But beneath that whisper, a quieter truth pulsed. Maybe it doesn't matter what you asked for. Maybe some things simply find you. Just as she steadied her breath, a knock sounded at the gate again. This time soft, polite. Not the knock of a child, not the knock of someone angry. A slow, deliberate knock. Zara's eyes widened. She rose to her feet, and the story began to turn. Zara hesitated before opening the gate. Her hand hovered over the wooden latch, her pulse quick and loud. The compound behind her was quiet, too quiet. Madame Risicot and her daughters were inside, simmering with anger and humiliation. If they found someone here for her... She drew in a slow breath. Another soft knock. 3 even taps.
Not impatient, not aggressive. Someone with discipline, or confidence, or both. She lifted the latch and opened the gate a few inches. Her breath caught. Prince Kolade stood on the other side. Sunlight struck the side of his face, outlining him in a warm glow. His attire was simpler than earlier, as though he had changed deliberately. Cream-colored agbada, minimal embroidery, nothing ostentatious. Behind him, 2 guards stood farther down the path, far enough to give privacy, close enough to serve. Zara froze, her fingers still gripping the gate. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. She couldn't read the expression on his face, not fully, but there was a quiet certainty in his eyes, the same calm presence he carried at the river. "Good afternoon, Zara," he said. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She stepped outside quickly, pulling the gate behind her. No one inside must see him. "My prince," she managed, her voice low. "Forgive me, I wasn't expecting..." He gave a small, almost amused nod. "I know. I shouldn't have come without warning." She swallowed, unsure what to do with her hands. She folded them, then unfolded them, then held them together again. He glanced at the compound walls behind her, then back at her face. "May we walk a little?" he asked. Her heart jolted. Only for a short while," she said. "If I'm gone too long..." He waited patiently. Zara inhaled and opened the gate enough to slip out, closing it carefully behind her. They began to walk along the narrow path beside the compound, shaded by tall trees that swayed gently in the warm afternoon breeze. For a few steps, neither spoke. The village noises drifted behind them, the distant drums, the chatter of women washing plates, the sounds of boys chasing each other down the dusty street. Then he turned to her. "I left the square earlier than I should have," he said quietly. She looked at him, surprised. "Why?" "Because I was distracted." His voice was steady. "I couldn't stop thinking about the river, or our conversation." Heat spread across her cheeks. She looked down at the path. He continued, slower now, as if picking his words with care. "Everyone I spoke to today gave me rehearsed answers, polished smiles, practiced bows. But you..." He paused. "You were honest." Zara lifted her eyes. "I didn't say anything special." "You didn't try to impress me," he said, "and that may be the rarest thing I've seen in a long time." She stopped walking without meaning to. He stopped too. Wind moved through the branches above them, scattering tiny leaves across their feet. "My prince," she said softly, "people here won't understand this. They already misunderstand." He tilted his head slightly. "Misunderstand what?" "That you're here." His expression softened. "I'm here because I want to be." Her breath caught. He held her gaze, and she felt a slow, quiet warmth settle in her chest, something she didn't quite know how to protect. After a moment, he spoke again. "Tell me the truth, Zara. Has your life always been like this?" She hesitated. Then she nodded once. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. The sincerity in his voice startled her more than the question. She looked away. "Your Highness, you owe me no apology." "Maybe not, but I feel it the same." A small silence circled them. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Not grand, not royal, just human. "I would like to see you again," he said. Her pulse jumped. "I don't know when I can leave the compound," she said honestly. "Madame Rasikat, she—" He didn't press her to finish. Instead, he gave a thoughtful nod. "Then I'll find another way." Her breath hitched. "My prince, please." He raised a hand gently. "I'm not trying to cause you trouble, but I won't pretend today didn't happen. I won't forget the river, or the way you spoke, or the way you listened." Her chest tightened. "Tomorrow," he said, stepping back slightly, "if you can't come to me, I will return here." Before she could answer, he gave her one last look, steady, certain, warm, and began walking back toward his guards. Zara stood still, rooted, watching him until he rounded the bend and disappeared from sight. When she finally returned to the compound, the hibiscus flowers on her shelf seemed brighter, almost like they had bloomed again. Zara slipped quietly into the compound, closing the creaking gate as gently as she could. The air inside felt heavier, thick with the kind of silence that comes before trouble. She held her breath. A moment passed. Then the main door burst open. Madame Rasikat stepped out, eyes sharp like a blade drawn too quickly. "Where did you go?" Zara's heartbeat stumbled. She kept her voice steady. "I swept the back corner, near the fence." Madame Rasikat narrowed her eyes. "For that long?" Zara nodded. "Yes, ma." Temi appeared behind her mother, annoyance painted across her face. Falake stood farther back, arms crossed tightly over her chest, eyes red from crying or anger. Zara couldn't tell. Madame Rasikat stepped closer. "Someone knocked earlier. Was it for you?" Zara kept her face as blank as she could manage. "A child came to sell fruit." Temi scoffed loudly. "You're lying." Zara didn't look at her. "I'm telling the truth." Madame Rasikat studied her face for several long, calculated seconds. Zara didn't blink. She forced her breathing to slow. Finally, Madame Rasikat clicked her tongue. "Enough. I don't have time to waste on you." She turned sharply and walked back inside, calling out instructions about the evening meal. Temi lingered in the doorway. She looked Zara over from top to bottom, suspicion clawing at her expression. "You think you're clever." Zara said nothing. Temi stepped closer. "If the prince is looking at you, it won't last. People like you don't end up with people like him. Don't fool yourself." The words dug deep, but Zara stayed still. Temi continued, her voice sharper now. "Don't put your hopes in the wrong place. You'll only embarrass yourself." Zara inhaled once slowly. "I'm not hoping for anything." Temi stared at her, skeptical. Then Falake stepped up beside her. Her eyes were darker now, unsettled, wounded. "I saw the way you stood just now. You're hiding something." Zara shook her head. "I'm not." Falake's jaw clenched. "If you ruin this for us, we won't forgive you." She turned and disappeared into the house. Temi followed with one last glare. Zara looked down at her hands. Her palms were trembling. Not from fear, from everything she had to hold inside. Her mind drifted back to the river, to the walk, to his eyes.
to the quiet honesty in his voice. Prince Kalade had said he would return tomorrow. She didn't know whether to pray for that or pray against it. But deep down, beneath the fear, beneath all the uncertainty, beneath all the years of being treated as less, a small, fragile hope had cracked open, and it refused to close. Evening settled over the village like a warm cloth placed gently over a wound. The sky shifted from gold to rose to deep violet, and the first stars blinked awake above the distant hills. Smoke curled from cooking fires, carrying the scent of roasted yam and pepper stew into the air. Inside the compound, the household moved with a subtle, unsettled tension. Madame Rasikat barked orders while pounding yam. Temi set out plates with more force than necessary. Falake paced in small circles, as though trying to swallow her own frustration. Zara worked quietly in the kitchen corner, grinding crayfish in a clay mortar. Her arms moved in slow, steady rhythm, but her mind was miles away. She kept replaying the same moment. "I would like to see you again."
Every time she heard that line in her head, her heartbeat fluttered. She tried to ignore it, tried to push it down, but the memory slipped through her control like water through a fist. Temi shot her a glare from across the room. "Why are you smiling?" Zara blinked. "I'm not." "You are," Temi insisted. "Wipe it off." Zara lowered her gaze and returned to the mortar. She swallowed the warmth rising in her chest and concentrated on the grinding, but her lips kept trying to curve upward on their own. Later, after clearing the dishes and scrubbing the last pot, she escaped to her sleeping corner. The lantern beside her mat flickered with a soft, uneven glow. She reached for the calabash on the shelf and lifted the hibiscus flowers gently. They were starting to wilt, but the color still burned a deep red, a defiant red. She touched the petals lightly, brushing away a tiny speck of dust. "I wish you had not come today," she whispered to no one. And yet, she was grateful he had. She lay down on her mat, but sleep refused to come. Her mind was too full, of the river, of his steady voice, of the way he had looked at her, as though her presence wasn't an accident. It was well past midnight before she drifted into a light, uneven sleep, the flowers resting beside her. When morning found her again, she was still holding them in her hand. The next day dawned quieter than the one before. The drums were silent now. The village had returned to its usual routines, market stalls opening, goats bleating, mothers calling for their children to hurry. But Zara felt something different in the air, something waiting. She swept the compound early, moved quickly through her chores, and tried not to let her eyes drift toward the gate every few minutes. Madame Rasikat noticed her distraction and snapped at her twice for being absent-minded. By late morning, Zara was in the backyard pounding ogbono seeds when she heard footsteps outside the gate. Firm, even, familiar. Her pulse jumped. Temi paused in the doorway, listening. Falake straightened her wrapper and moved closer to the sound. Madame Rasikat emerged with a suspicious glare. "Who is that?" she demanded. A soft knock came. 3 controlled taps. Zara froze. Temi and Falake exchanged horrified looks. Madame Rasikat's jaw tightened. "Zara, stay where you are." She marched to the gate and flung it open. And her face drained of color. Prince Kolade stood there, straight-backed, calm, and unhurried. He carried no ceremonial staff, no entourage crowding behind him. Only 2 guards stood a respectful distance away. "Good morning, madame," he said politely. Madame Rasikat stammered. My prince, forgive me, I didn't know. Please, come in." He shook his head gently. "I am here to speak with Zara." Silence slammed into the compound. Falake inhaled sharply. Temi's mouth fell open. Zara felt her entire world tilt. Madame Rasikat's composure cracked like clay under heat. "Zara," she swallowed. "Yes, of course, she's..."
Zara, Kolade repeated, looking past the woman. And then, his eyes found her. Zara stood in the middle of the compound, hands still dusted with ogbono powder, heart pounding hard enough to shake her ribs. He smiled. Small. Genuine, like he was relieved to see her. Zara stepped forward slowly, stopping halfway between him and the kitchen shed. "My prince," she said softly. Madame Razikat sidestepped, forcing a brittle smile. "Zara, don't just stand there. Greet him properly. Show respect." Kolade lifted a hand. "She already has." Falake stared at him as if trying to understand something that made no sense. Temi's eyes darted between Zara and the prince with growing resentment. Kolade spoke again, his tone gentle but certain. "I hope I'm not intruding." Zara shook her head. "No, my prince. He came to walk with you, if you are allowed." The entire compound stiffened. Allowed. The word hung in the heat. Madame Razikat forced her pride so visibly it hurt to watch. "She may go," she said, voice tight. Zara blinked. She had never heard the woman grant her permission in that tone before, half threat, half submission. Kolade stepped back from the gate, giving Zara room to join him. She hesitated only a moment, then walked forward. Every pair of eyes in the compound followed her. Temi's, sharp with disbelief. Falake's, clouded with dread and envy. Madame Razikat's, burning with a hatred that clung like smoke. Zara stepped out of the gate. Kolade fell into step behind her, and the gate closed behind them. For the first time in her life, she wasn't leaving the compound as a servant. She was leaving it as someone the prince came back for. Zara walked beside Prince Kolade with careful, measured steps. The village path stretched ahead of them, narrow, dusty, lined with rows of cassioka and tall trees whose leaves whispered above their heads. Children paused mid-play to stare. Women carrying baskets slowed down, nudging one another in disbelief. Zara kept her eyes forward. Her breaths were small and controlled. Her palms were still trembling slightly from the confrontation inside the compound. Kolade walked calmly beside her, hands clasped loosely behind his back. "You look worried," he said gently. I don't want to cause trouble. Trouble comes whether you invite it or not. It's what you do afterward that matters." She glanced at him. "People are staring." He smiled lightly. "They stared at me when I arrived yesterday. They stared at the women in the square. Today, they stare at you. Staring is free. Let them spend their eyes however they want." The corner of her mouth threatened to lift. They walked a little further until they reached the edge of the village where the trees formed a natural arch. A cool shade washed over them. Kolade slowed his steps. "I meant what I said," he began. "I wanted to see you again." Zara swallowed. "My prince, I still don't understand why." He looked ahead, hands still behind him. "When you speak, you don't hide behind politeness. You don't pretend, and you saw me, not the crown. Do you know how rare that is?" She didn't respond. She didn't trust herself to. A warm breeze lifted the hem of her wrapper. Kolade stopped beneath the shade of a large tree. Zara stopped beside him. "Zara," he said quietly, "do you know how many people I spoke to yesterday?" Zara shook her head. "More than I could count, but the only conversation that stayed in my mind was the one by the river." Zara's heart shifted, pain, hope, confusion, all rising at once. He glanced at her hands. "May I ask you something personal?" She nodded. "What do you want? Not what you've been told to want, not what's been forced on you. What do you want?" Her breath caught. No one had asked her that before, not once in her entire life. She looked down at the earth. I don't know." "You must know something." She hesitated, then whispered, "I want freedom." Kolade exhaled slowly, as if the word hit a place inside him, too. "Freedom," he repeated. "Not an easy dream." "No," she said. but it is mine." He looked at her again, studying her expression, as though carefully collecting every detail. "You deserve more than freedom, but that is a good place to start." Her chest tightened. Standing there with him in the quiet, she felt something shift in the air, a sense that her life, long locked in place, had begun to move in a direction she hadn't dared to imagine. Then Kolade turned to her and said something she never expected. "Zara, may I visit again tomorrow?"
Her pulse stumbled. "Yes," she said softly. "Good." He smiled, warm, real, unguarded. And in that moment, the path ahead of them didn't look dusty or narrow. It looked like possibility. When Zara returned to the compound, the atmosphere inside hit her like a hot wall. She had barely closed the gate when Madame Risicot stormed out of the house, lips tight, eyes aflame. "You dare bring him here again?" she snapped. "You stand beside him in broad daylight like you belong there?" Zara kept her voice calm. "He came on his own." "He came because you bewitched him," Temi spat from behind her mother. "Everyone saw you walking with him like some—" "Temi," Folake cut in, voice shaky, "don't say things you can't take back." Temi ignored her. "You used something. You think we don't know girls who live in misery often try desperate things? Maybe your mother taught you." Zara's face hardened sharply. "Do not speak about my mother." Temi froze, startled by the steel in Zara's voice. Madame Risicot stepped closer, looming. "Listen to me very well. If the prince thinks he can pick you, someone with no family, no background, no standing, he will embarrass himself, and he will embarrass us, and I will not allow that." Zara said nothing. Madame Risicot's voice dropped to a harsh whisper. "You will not see him again." A silence spread through the compound, thick and uncomfortable. Folake shifted uneasily. Her eyes flicked from Zara to her mother, then back again. "Mama," Folake murmured, "this isn't wise. If he keeps coming, people will talk even more, and if we make a scene—" "Shut your mouth," Madame Risicot snapped. Folake fell silent instantly. Madame Risicot turned back to Zara. "I will lock the gate tomorrow. You will stay inside. If you step outside, you'll sleep in the bush." Zara felt something cold settle inside her chest. "But he will come," Zara said quietly. Madame Risicot's eyes narrowed. "Let him come. He will meet a locked gate." "And he will ask why," Zara murmured. Madame Risicot raised her chin. "Then I will tell him the truth, that you are nothing more than a girl who wants what does not belong to her." Folake looked down at her feet, uncomfortable. Temi folded her arms tightly, as though bracing herself for something she couldn't maim. Zara held Madame Risicot's gaze, steady and unblinking. In a voice that was soft but unshakable, she said, "You can lock the gate, but you can't decide what belongs to me." Madame Risicot's nostrils flared. "You will regret this," she hissed. Zara stepped back quietly and walked toward her sleeping corner. Her hands were cold, her pulse was quick, but her spine stayed straight. For the first time in her life, she wasn't shrinking, she wasn't apologizing, she wasn't silent, she was standing. And that, more than anything, terrified the people who had built their power on her quietness. As night settled over the compound once more, Zara lay on her mat staring at the ceiling. The hibiscus flowers rested beside her, their color dim but still alive. The world she knew was shifting, and the consequences were coming. Morning arrived heavy and tense. Even before the sun pushed over the rooftops, Zara could sense it, something sharp waiting in the air, a confrontation hiding beneath the everyday noises of the compound. Madame Risicot woke earlier than usual. Her footsteps thundered through the house, her wrapper snapping around her legs as she moved. Folake and Temi tiptoed around her, speaking in whispers, avoiding her eyes. Zara washed her face quietly, tying her wrapper. She did not expect kindness, but she did expect today to be different. Madame Risicot stepped outside, looked directly at Zara, and marched toward the gate.
The sound echoed. Clack. She pulled the metal latch down. Then she drew a thick wooden beam across the gate. Then she inserted a rusted padlock. Click, click, click. Zara stood still. Madame Risicot dusted her hands and turned around with a triumphant smirk. "You won't step outside this compound today. Let the prince come. Let him knock. I won't open." Temmie leaned in the doorway, arms folded, satisfaction painted across her face. Folake looked uneasy but said nothing. Zara exhaled through her nose, steady. "You cannot stop him from speaking to me." Madame Risicot smiled in a cold, slow way. "My dear, watch me." Zara went silent, not because she was afraid, but because she understood something sharp and dangerous. Madame Risicot was not simply protecting her position anymore. She was desperate. Desperation made people foolish. Zara returned to her chores with a quietness that confused Temmie and irritated Madame Risicot. She scrubbed pots, poured out stale water, cleaned the goat pen. Every few minutes, Temmie peeked around a corner as if expecting Zara to attempt escape. Zara never did. She waited. Her heartbeat, however, refused to be calm. By mid-morning, the air grew thick with heat. Sweat streaked Zara's back as she swept the compound floor. Folake sat under the shade, pretending to twist her hair, but clearly watching Zara with a troubled expression. Temmie paced around the gate smugly, as if she expected to be congratulated for her vigilance. Then, knock. A single, measured tap. The entire compound froze. Folake's head snapped up. Temmie's gasped. Madame Risicot spilled the bowl of gari she was sieving. Another knock. Calm, patient, and unmistakable. Madame Risicot hissed, "Nobody move." She hurried to the gate, adjusting her wrapper, wiping her face as if preparing for battle. "Who is it?" she barked, though she already feared the answer. A warm, steady voice filtered through the wooden planks. "Madame Risicot." Folake tensed. Temmie's eyes widened. Zara's broom slipped from her hands. Kaledi continued, "I came to see Zara." Madame Risicot closed her eyes briefly, then forced her voice into a thin, polite tone. "My prince, she's busy inside." "Busy?" Kaledi asked calmly. "Doing what?" Madame Risicot swallowed. "Housework. She cannot be disturbed." A short silence followed. Then Kaledi's tone changed, not harsh, not loud, but firm in a way that commanded the air around it. "Open the gate, madam." Temmie looked at her mother horrified. "Mama, don't open it." Folake whispered urgently, "Mama, please do not anger him." Madame Risicot gripped the metal latch, shaking. Sweat glistened on her forehead. "I cannot open it, my prince," she stammered. "It is locked. She shouldn't be—" "Open the gate," Kaledi repeated. This time, not a request, a command. Madame Risicot's hand trembled. Zara stood in the center of the compound, heat rising to her cheeks, pulse racing so fast she felt dizzy. The world around her seemed to shrink until only two things remained, the locked gate and the man outside asking for her. Madame Risicot's breathing quickened. For the first time she looked afraid, truly afraid. She fumbled with the padlock, muttering under her breath. Finally, click. The lock fell open. She lifted the wooden beam with shaky arms. Then she pulled the gate open. Prince Kaledi stepped inside. The quiet power he carried filled the compound. His eyes swept the space once, taking in the tension, the nervous sisters, the trembling stepmother, before landing gently on Zara, and everything else faded. Zara stood still, her fingers brushing lightly against her wrapper, unsure where to place her hands. She hadn't expected him to insist, she hadn't expected him to command the gate open, and she certainly hadn't expected him to look at her the way he was looking at her now. Not like she was a servant, not like she was a curiosity, but like someone he had come for. Kaledi walked toward her with measured steps. He stopped a few paces away, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence, far enough that he didn't crowd her. "I came as I said I would," he said. Zara nodded once. "Yes, my prince."
I didn't think they would open the gate. I noticed, he replied, his tone soft but edged with displeasure. Behind him, Madame Risicot stood rigid, swallowing hard. Temmie hid partially behind her. Falake watched with wide eyes, confusion and uncertainty flickering across her face. Kaledi did not acknowledge them. His focus remained entirely on Zara. "I hope you are well," he said. She nodded again. "Yes, my prince. You seem tired."
I had work to do. His jaw tightened slightly. I see. He looked around the compound once more, really looked this time. The cracked clay walls, the battered pots, the broken stool near Zara's sleeping corner, the way she instinctively tucked her hands behind her as if hiding rough palms. His expression darkened, not with anger at her, but with anger for her. Madame Risicot noticed the shift in his eyes and immediately stepped forward with a forced laugh. "My prince, please, don't think she suffers here. We treat her well. She eats plenty. She sleeps well. She—" Kolade raised a hand without looking at her. Silence. Madame Risicot froze mid-sentence. He returned his attention to Zara. "Walk with me?" he asked gently. Her breath caught. She glanced briefly at Madame Risicot, whose eyes now bulged with a mix of rage and disbelief. Zara swallowed. "Yes." He moved aside, giving her room to walk. She stepped toward him, light-footed, almost floating. Falake watched her with something softer than before, fear mixed with guilt. Temmie glared openly now, her envy losing its mask. Madame Risicot forced a tight smile. "We will wait here until you return, my prince." Kolade finally looked at her, and the look he gave made her step back. "You will not wait," he said simply. "Zara and I will return when we choose." Madame Risicot's face crumpled. Kolade turned and walked out of the compound. Zara followed, closing the gate gently behind her. Once they were a short distance away, he slowed his pace so she could walk beside him. After a few steps, he spoke. "Zara, I saw something today." She looked up at him. "What did you see?" His voice was quiet, but his words landed like truth laid bare. "I saw how small they tried to make you." Her throat tightened. "But I also saw something they didn't see, something they can't control." She swallowed hard. "What?" He looked at her, eyes steady, unshaken. "Your strength." A slow breath left her lips. "And your dignity," he added. "It hasn't left you, even here." Emotion hit her chest in a wave so sudden her steps faltered. No one had ever said such words about her. No one had ever looked at her and seen anything beyond utility. She stopped walking. Kolade stopped too. Her voice was almost a whisper. "My prince, why do you speak to me like this?" He studied her face, his expression warm and unwavering. "Because it is the only way I know how to speak to someone I respect." The world seemed to tilt. Slowly, softly, dangerously. Zara lowered her gaze, overwhelmed. Kolade stepped slightly closer, not touching, just near enough that she felt the steadiness of him, the quiet certainty, the unspoken promise. "You are not invisible. Not to me." And for the first time in her life, Zara believed it. The farther they walked from the compound, the lighter the air felt around Zara, not because the village path was cooler or quieter, but because the weight of watching eyes had fallen away behind them. Only the soft thrum of insects and the rustle of trees kept them company. Kolade slowed his pace until they reached a small clearing shaded by a large mango tree. It was the same tree children often used as a meeting point after school, but at this hour the field was empty. The sunlight filtered through the leaves in golden fragments, painting their clothes with shifting patterns. Zara stood beside him, uneasy but steady. Kolade folded his hands behind his back. "He's got something he must ask," he said softly. She turned to him. "What is it?" He looked away for a moment, gathering his thoughts. When he met her eyes again, his expression was serious. "Do you want a different life?" Her breath caught, sharp, unexpected. Different life.
The words were simple, but they felt too big to hold, too dangerous to touch. She swallowed. I've never been asked that. I'm asking now. She looked at him, uncertain. Why me? Kolade stepped closer, slow and deliberate. Because you deserve to answer the question, because you deserve a choice. Zara's fingers twisted together. For a moment she couldn't speak. The truth pressed inside her chest like a trembling bird. Yes, she whispered. I want a different life. Kolade nodded once. The small movement held the weight of something decided. Good, he said. Her brow furrowed. Why? His gaze was steady, unwavering. Because I want you to have one. She exhaled shakily, the air leaving her lungs as if released from years of tightness. He softened his voice. You don't have to say anything else today. I only needed to hear that. The rest, we will face together. Together. The words struck something deep inside her, something that frightened her but didn't make her pull away. Before she could speak, he gestured toward the path leading back. Come, he said. I'll walk you home. The walk back was quiet, but not strained, a quiet where hearts listened more than mouths spoke. When they reached the compound gate, Zara hesitated. The noise inside had grown, pots clattering, tense voices, the simmer of anger waiting for an outlet. Kolade sensed her dread. Zara, he said softly, you're not alone. Her eyes lifted to his. You're seen, he added, and I'm not done finding you. She nodded slowly, absorbing the words like warmth on cold skin. Then she stepped back into the compound. The gate closed behind her, and Madame Risicat was waiting. The moment she entered, the compound erupted. Madame Risicat stormed toward her, wrapper flaring, eyes gleaming with fury. Temi stood behind her like a shadow sharpened into a knife. Folake lingered near the wall, wringing her fingers. You shameful girl, Madame Risicat hissed. Walking around with him, again, with the whole village watching? Do you think this is some kind of game? Zara stayed silent. You think you're special? Temi screeched. You think you can stand beside him like you're someone? Zara's jaw tightened. I didn't invite him. That's the problem, Temi cried. He chose you. Folake shot her sister a warning look, but Temi was already too far gone, fueled by fear, envy, and the sick realization that the prince she had dreamed of had not looked at her once. Madame Risicat forced a tight smile. I will not let him come again, she vowed. Tomorrow I will take you to my sister's farm. You will stay there until he leaves the village. Zara stiffened. You can't. I can, Madame Risicat roared. He will forget you if you disappear.
Temi smirked. Falake's eyes widened. Mama, that's too much. Shut up, Madame Risicat barked. Zara took a slow breath. If you take me away, he will come here again. He'll meet an empty compound, Madame Risicat spat. Zara's voice softened into something that made the air shift. And he will keep asking where I went. Madame Risicat froze. Temi's smirk flickered. Falake's breath caught. Zara held their eyes, calm, steady, unafraid. You can hide me, she said quietly, but you cannot stop him. It was the truth, and they all felt it. Madame Risicat's rage trembled, looking for a place to strike, but none would hold. Zara walked past her, collected the broom, and began sweeping in long, even strokes, not submissive, not broken, simply choosing calm. Temi stared at her like she was a stranger. Folake watched with a mixture of disbelief and reluctant awe. Madame Risicat stood rooted in place, realizing something terrifying. Zara was no longer under her thumb. Something in the girl had changed, and the change had begun at the river. Late afternoon painted the compound in warm oranges and long shadows. Zara was washing plates behind the house when she heard hurried footsteps and hushed, panicked whispers from the front yard. She paused, water dripping from her fingers. Temi's voice rose, frantic. Mama! Mama, come quickly! Zara wiped her hands and stepped cautiously toward the front yard. A palace guard stood inside the compound, not a messenger, not a servant, a full royal guard. His uniform gleamed, his stance was firm, his arrival radiated authority. Madame Risicot rushed forward, breathless. "Officer, what brings you?" The guard unrolled a scroll embossed with the royal emblem. He spoke clearly, his voice carrying through the entire compound. "By order of His Highness Prince Kolade of Arun Kingdom." He paused. The air tightened. "Zara of Iroko Elage is requested to appear at the palace tomorrow morning." The world seemed to hold its breath. Requested, not invited. Requested. Falake's hand flew to her mouth. Temi choked on an inhale. Madame Risicot's eyes widened so much Zara thought they might fall out. Zara herself felt the ground sway. The guard continued. "She is to be escorted with respect and treated as an honored guest. A personal carriage will arrive at dawn." Dawn. Personal carriage. Honored guest. Zara's vision blurred for a moment, not from fear, but from the shock of hearing her name wrapped in dignity. Madame Risicot stumbled forward, voice cracking. "Officer, surely there is a mistake. She is a girl under my care. Surely the prince meant—" The guard turned his head slightly, expression unchanging. The prince named her directly. Temi's knees wobbled. Falake grabbed her arm to steady her. Zara swallowed, unable to move. The guard rolled the scroll and struck his chest in salute. Then he turned and walked out, leaving a trail of stunned silence. The moment he left, the entire compound erupted. Falake, he sent for her. Temi, this cannot be happening. Madame Risicot, no, I won't accept this. I won't. She spun toward Zara, shaking. What did you do to him? Zara stepped back, voice calm but firm. Nothing. Lies! It must be witchcraft. You... Mama, Falake whispered, horrified. Stop! You will disgrace yourself. Temi covered her mouth, tears gathering. Tears of envy, fear, and disbelief. Zara looked at them, really looked, and something inside her settled. Not arrogance, not triumph, just truth. She straightened her shoulders. I will go, she said softly. Madame Risicot felt her power crumble. Zara wasn't asking. Zara wasn't pleading. Zara wasn't waiting for permission. The sun dipped lower, bathing the scene in a glowing light that made Zara's silhouette appear taller, stronger, and for the first time since she stepped into this house as a lost girl with nowhere to sleep, Madame Risicot looked at her not as property, but as someone she could no longer control. Zara hardly slept that night. She lay on her mat staring at the ceiling, her heart thudding softly in her chest. The hibiscus flowers rested beside her head, their petals curled inward, their color deepened in the lantern glow. They looked almost like tiny beating hearts. She kept hearing the guard's voice in her mind. Requested to appear at the palace. Escorted with respect. Personal carriage. Her life had always been quiet, invisible, tucked behind walls and chores, and a name nobody cared to call except when demanding something of her. But now her name had traveled ahead of her, beyond the compound, beyond the village, beyond the life she'd been forced into. Somewhere in the palace, Prince Kolade had said it aloud, and it had been carried back to her. By morning, a soft orange light crept across the compound as roosters crowed and morning fires crackled. Zara arose before anyone else, washed her face, and wrapped herself in the cleanest wrapper she owned, a simple indigo cloth she had mended many times, but worn with quiet pride. She tied her hair, straightened her shoulders, then she waited. The compound felt unnaturally still. Falake peeked from the doorway, her eyes restless, searching Zara's face as if hoping to see some sign of fear or hesitation. But Zara only stood tall. Temi appeared next, wrapped in a shawl, her face puffy from crying through the night. She stared at Zara with a bitterness that trembled around the edges. Madame Risicot finally stepped outside, her wrapper slanted, hair messy, sleep lines carved into her face from a night spent battling panic. She crossed her arms tightly.
They will come and realize they made a mistake, she muttered. They will ask for someone else, someone befitting. Zara didn't reply. She didn't need to. The clatter of wheels interrupted the air. Falake gasped. Temi spun toward the gate. Even Madame Risikat froze. A royal carriage, polished wood, golden lining, led by 2 horses with shining manes, stopped in front of the compound. A guard stepped down, bowing in the direction of the gate. "Zara of Iroko, we have come for you." The words struck the compound like thunder. Temi choked on her breath. Falake pressed her hand to her chest. Madame Risikat's eyes widened so much Zara thought they might fall out. Zara herself felt the ground sway. The guard rolled the scroll and struck his chest in salute. Then he turned and walked out, leaving a trail of stunned silence. The ride to the palace was unlike anything Zara had ever felt. The air rushing past the carriage carried scents of morning dew, palm trees, toasted maize, and distant cooking fires from homes just beginning their day. As the village blurred behind her, Zara pressed her fingers lightly to the carriage window. Her reflection stared back, nervous, hopeful, confused, alive. Is this truly happening? The palace walls rose ahead like a grand promise, made of white stone and red clay, reflecting the dawn light. Guards lined the entrance in sharp formation, spears upright, uniforms immaculate. The carriage slowed. When it stopped, one of the palace attendants moved forward and opened the door with a respectful bow. "Welcome, Zara." She stepped out, and the palace courtyard opened before her, wide, bright, alive with color. Trees with blooming orange flowers lined the path. Water channels ran along the edges, catching sunlight and scattering it like shards of gold. Birds perched on sculpted stone lanterns, singing as if greeting a familiar friend. Zara felt the world tilt under her feet. An attendant stepped forward. "This way." She followed him through the wide courtyard until they reached a broad neem tree, the very tree she'd stood beside during her first conversation with the prince on palace grounds. She recognized it immediately. She stopped. He was there. Prince Kalade stood beneath the shade, hands clasped behind his back, dressed in soft cream robes that moved gently with the breeze. When he saw her, something warm lit his face, not the polite smile of royalty, something deeper, a spark of recognition, relief, intention.
"Zara," he said, voice softer than she'd ever heard it. She bowed her head slightly. "My prince." "You came," he said. "I was asked to." He smiled lightly. "I hoped you would choose to." Her chest tightened. She didn't know how to answer that. Kolade stepped closer and spoke quietly, as if the palace itself deserved privacy for the moment. "I have something important to discuss with you," he said. She swallowed. "I am listening." He nodded once, steadying himself. 3 days ago, at the river, I felt something I could not explain. Yesterday, I understood it better, and by last night, I knew it clearly. Her heartbeat slowed, heavy and deep. "Knew what?" she whispered. He held her gaze. "That I want you to stay here," he said softly. "I want to know you better, to understand you, to hear what lies in your heart. But I cannot do that if you remain in a house where you are treated as less than a person." Zara felt her breath catch. "You deserve more," he added gently. "Not because of me, because of you." A quiet stretched between them, warm and fragile. What are you asking me to do?" she whispered. Kolade stepped even closer, near but respectful. "I'm asking you to consider leaving that house, not forever, not immediately, but step away from their shadows, even for a little while. Let me show you a life where you are valued." Zara swallowed, emotion tightening her throat. "I do not want to force anything," he continued softly. "You must choose freely. Your life belongs to you." Her chest tightened. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever asked her to choose her own path. She blinked. I don't know if I'm ready. Kolade nodded once. Then I will wait. She exhaled shakily. He took a single step back, giving her room. I arranged for you to meet someone today. A woman I trust. She will guide you, listen to you. Zara frowned. Who? He gestured toward the palace entrance. Zara turned. A tall, graceful woman walked toward them, dark-skinned, serene, dressed in warm, earth-toned fabrics, her posture elegant but firm. She approached with a quiet confidence, bowing slightly. Zara, Kalane said, this is Lady Ralia, my aunt. A royal aunt. Zara stiffened in surprise. Lady Ralia smiled gently. I've heard much about you. Come, walk with me. Zara turned back toward Kolade. He nodded. Go, I will wait here. Her legs felt shaky, but she followed Lady Ralia into the palace gardens, and every step forward felt like stepping into a life she had never dared to imagine. The palace gardens stretched wide, filled with flowers in ruby reds, soft purples, bright oranges, and greens so rich they looked painted. The air carried scents of jasmine and wet earth. Zara walked beside Lady Ralia on a stone path lined with lanterns carved into the shape of lotus petals. Lady Ralia did not speak at first. She allowed the silence to settle gently between them. Zara found the quiet strangely comforting. Finally, Lady Ralia glanced at her. You're frightened. Zara blinked. I'm not sure. It's all right, Lady Ralia said softly. Fear is only the body trying to catch up to change. Zara looked at the ground. I don't know why he brought me here. Lady Ralia smiled. He brought you here because you matter to him, because you've moved something in him he thought was immovable. Her heart thudded. But, Lady Ralia continued, more importantly, you brought yourself here. Zara stopped walking. I didn't choose to come. He sent for me. And you could have refused, Lady Ralia said gently. You could have hidden. You could have begged to stay behind. She stepped closer. But you didn't. You walked forward. Zara exhaled slowly. Lady Ralia guided her to a wooden bench beneath a flowering tree heavy with orange blooms. They sat. Tell me, Lady Ralia said. What do you want? Zara's throat tightened. Everyone keeps asking me that. Because it matters. I don't know, she whispered. Lady Ralia tilted her head. You know more than you think. Zara stared at her hands. I want peace. I want respect. She took a shaking breath. I want to feel like my life belongs to me. Lady Ralia nodded. Good. Those are the seeds of a true life. Zara looked up slowly. Do you think I deserve any of that? Lady Ralia held her gaze with warm, steady eyes. I think you deserve far more than what you have been given. Zara's eyes stung. You're strong, Lady Ralia said softly. Strong in a way that cannot be taught. Kolade sees it. I see it. The question is, can you see it? Zara looked away, blinking back emotion. Lady Ralia reached out and gently lifted her chin so their eyes met. You are not meant to be hidden, she said. Do not let anyone convince you otherwise. Tears threatened to spill over. Zara held them back. Come, Lady Ralia said, rising gracefully. Walk with me. There is more I must show you. Zara stood. As they walked deeper into the gardens, listening to the soft trickle of water from a nearby fountain, she felt something unfamiliar stir inside her. Not fear, not confusion, not disbelief. Hope. It was fragile, trembling, new, but it was alive.
Lady Ralia led Zara along a curved path toward a quiet corner of the garden. The palace seemed to fall away behind them. Birds hopped along the stone edges. A small pond shimmered, reflecting the pale morning sun. They stopped beside a wooden pavilion, draped with soft white curtains that swayed gently in the breeze. Zara hesitated. "Why bring me here?" Lady Ralia studied her face. "Because Kolade trusts you, and because he wants you to know the truth before you make any decision." Her heart kicked. What truth? About his life, his future, what standing beside him really means. Zara's breath faltered. "Madame Rasikat said I was nothing to him, just a whimsy." "My aunts aren't wrong, but incomplete." Lady Ralia motioned for her to sit. Zara lowered herself onto a cushioned seat, spine straight. Lady Ralia sat across from her, posture calm, eyes clear. "Zara," she said, "Kolade is not only a prince, he is the heir, the next king. Whoever stands beside him will face scrutiny, pressure, expectations that can swallow a person whole." Zara's breath faltered. "I do not say this to frighten you," Lady Ralia continued gently. "I say it because I will not allow you to walk into something blind." Zara looked down. "I don't come from anything. I don't have status. I've never even stepped inside a real school. I can't read as well as others. People will laugh." "Let them," Lady Ralia said calmly. "You are not defined by letters on a page." Tears pricked Zara's eyes. Lady Ralia leaned in a little. "What you carry inside you is worth more than any title. Kolade sees it, but he will not force you to step into a life you don't want." Zara pressed her hands together. "What if I'm not enough?" Lady Ralia's smile was warm, almost motherly. "You are more than enough, but you must believe it. Half of power is simply knowing you deserve to stand where you stand." Zara sat with that for a long, heavy moment. The pond rippled, a few leaves drifted across its surface, the morning breeze wrapped around them in a soft hush. Then Lady Ralia reached into the small wooden tray beside her and pulled out a folded piece of cloth. She opened it slowly. Inside was a delicate necklace, gold, simple, elegant, shaped like a small sun rising behind a hill. Zara frowned slightly. "What is it?" "A symbol," Lady Ralia said. "It belonged to Kolade's grandmother. She wore it before she became queen. It was given to her when she was still a village girl, very much like you." Zara's breath hitched. "She wasn't born into royalty either," Lady Ralia continued. "She was chosen because she had courage, because she held her dignity even when the world tried to strip her of it." Zara stared at the necklace, small, beautiful, glowing faintly in the morning light. Lady Ralia placed it gently in her hand. "This is not a gift. It is a question." Zara looked up slowly. "Do you want to step into the life waiting for you, or return to the one you have been forced to live?" Zara's fingers tightened around the pendant. She didn't answer immediately. The garden waited with her. After a long silence, Lady Ralia rose. "Take a walk. Think. And when you're ready, go back to him." Zara stood quietly, the weight of the necklace grounding her. She walked alone through the garden, the scent of flowers swirling around her, the wind brushing her cheeks, the palace walls rising like a promise in the distance. She paused beneath the large neem tree, closed her eyes, and let herself breathe. For the first time in her life, the choice was hers. Prince Kalane stood at the edge of the courtyard near the neem tree, hands behind him, staring at the fountain. He looked deep in thought, the kind of stillness only someone carrying heavy decisions could hold. Zara approached slowly. He turned. The moment he saw her, his expression softened. Warmth spread across his face like sunlight breaking through a cloud. "Zara," he said. Her voice was quiet. "I spoke with Lady Ralia." "I know." He stepped closer. And? Zara held up the necklace. His eyes widened, surprise, then something deeper. She looked down at the pendant resting in her palm. She said it was a question. He nodded. It is. Zara took a slow breath. My whole life, people made choices for me. Where I slept, what I did, who I was allowed to be. No one ever asked what I wanted. Kolade listened, every muscle attentive. But today, she continued, you asked me, she asked me, and for once I felt seen. She lifted her eyes to his. Kolade, I don't know how to be a princess. I don't know how to act or speak like someone from this world. I don't know the things I'm supposed to know. He stepped forward, closing the space between them. You don't have to know, he said softly. You only have to be yourself. Everything else can be learned. Zara's voice trembled. What if I fail? Kolade reached out carefully, giving her enough time to step away if she wanted. She didn't. His fingers brushed hers lightly. Then we failed together, and get back up together. Her breath shook. He held her hand gently. Zara, he said, I don't want a symbol. I don't want someone polished or rehearsed or molded into a shape that pleases the court. I want you. The girl who spoke her mind at the river. The girl who found her courage in the middle of fear. The girl who chose truth over silence. Tears filled Zara's eyes, but didn't fall. She looked at the necklace again, then lifted it, brought it to her neck, and clasped it quietly. When she looked up, her voice was steady. I choose this life, she said. I choose you. Kolade exhaled slowly, a sound of relief, gratitude, emotion. He stepped closer, lifting her hands gently. Then from this moment, no one will treat you as less than who you are. She nodded. He squeezed her hands softly. I will speak to the council, my father, the royal court. There will be talk, opinions, resistance, but I will stand by you. Zara looked at his gaze. And I will stand by myself. A small smile touched his lips. Good. The breeze shifted slightly, carrying the scent of flowers and sunlight. The palace bells rang faintly in the background, as if blessing the moment. Kolade offered his arm. Zara placed her hand in the crook of it. They walked toward the palace together, one steady step at a time, not as a prince and a servant girl, but as two lives intertwining by choice. Inside the palace entrance, Lady Ralia watched from a distance, lips curved in a soft, knowing smile. Back in the village, word would spread, reactions would rise, people would talk, whisper, protest, marvel. But none of that mattered, because Zara had done the one thing she had never been allowed to do. She chose her own story, and it was only the beginning.